The Kansas City Chiefs have now won 3 games in a row, moving their record to 3-1 on the season, and won their first game in 20 years in New York, and are currently the leaders in the AFC. But after last night's performance, there seems to be a lot of questions surrounding this team. So what we're going to do here today is I'm going to give you my takeaways from the game, and let's just dissect all of this and get into the nitty-gritty of last night's game. Now, with all that, let's cut the chit-chat and let's have some fun. What a game last night was, as the Kansas City Chiefs beat the New York Jets by a final score of 23-20. And for everyone who checked in on the live stream last night, I greatly appreciate it. It's always a good and enjoyable time to talk to NFL fans and the Chiefs Kingdom, and you already know, I'm going to set up the scheduling and we're going to be right back in the same place doing again on Sunday as the Minnesota Vikings come into town. It should be another fun one. Don't let that Minnesota Vikings record fool you. But now, transitioning into last night's game, in an easy way to phrase it, it was twists, turns, back and forth in every direction. We saw the Kansas City Chiefs at the peak, at the best of their ability and what they can be. And then we saw Kansas City when they were at the lowest of lows. And the first thing I want to kick it off with, because this is Monday morning reactions, is the penalties. And that seems to be what everyone is discussing, is that the refs gave the Kansas City Chiefs another victory because that was not holding on Sauce Gardner. And also the Donovan Smith had a hold on Patrick Mahomes' basically 25-yard clinching third down run. It gets frustrating, but Chiefs Kingdom, you're going to have to grasp with me here a little bit, because this is what's going to happen. And it's going to tend to happen as long as Patrick Mahomes, Coach Reid, is running this team, and also as long as the Kansas City Chiefs are in this national spotlight, because everyone's going to be tuned in, and it's going to be constantly, because media, they want the Kansas City Chiefs on their TV. So everyone's going to nitpick until things change. Now, on those 2 penalties, they were obvious penalties. Now, it's your decision if you want to take upon social media and go back and forth and argue. I'm not going to do that, but you definitely can make a case, because the main factor on why this was even a game was because of penalties as well, when the refs called that face mask, which I'm not arguing the face mask on Jawaan Taylor. I'm arguing on when it happened. And everyone is in agreement it was not in the end zone, leading to 2 points and the first points for the New York Jets, which also leads to the New York Jets getting the football back. And on that drive, there was a quote-unquote horse collar, which was not a horse collar, which keeps the New York Jets alive and puts a touchdown on the board. So penalties, the refs, they were back and forth everywhere, but it definitely was not one-sided, and it wasn't strictly based on the Kansas City Chiefs winning this game. And I'm speaking on an unbiased perspective, because you can say penalties that happen for the Jets, and you can say penalties that happen for Kansas City. I'm not going back and forth with that. But those 2 last penalties, they were penalties. Gardner, and it's funny, Sauce Gardner was even trying to preach his claim tonight, saying, this is why I did this, yada, yada, yada. But in his quote of mentioning that, he said it was past 5 yards. And regardless what you do past 5 yards, if you have your hands draped all over a receiver, the ref is going to call that. And now, the holding that everyone wanted to be called on Donovan Smith, if you look at former pro players, NFL offensive linemen, they say if you have your hands inside their pads, the refs aren't going to call that. And that's strictly what it was. Now, I can give you, it's tit for tat, really. Like, I'm 50-50 on it. I can understand why they didn't call it. And then I can see a perspective on where fans are preaching, well, look, because he's tugging on the jersey. But at the motion he's tugging on the jersey, his hand's still inside too. And also, he was basically standing up Jermaine Johnson. Now, if Jermaine Johnson was a smart player and he wanted the flag called against him, you're going to try to turn and fall to the ground and make it obvious for the refs to call it, which he didn't. And he didn't play any favors there. So As unfortunate as penalties are far from the case. The Kansas City Chiefs won this game. It wasn't rigged. And yes, Robert Saleh, the whole New York Jets defense, the whole New York Jets team is so pissed about it, but it's something you gotta coach up. And it's funny, I even saw a photo out there too that on that same play that Gardner had a holding, literally on Kelsey, I think it was DJ Reed, was all draped over him, and I think that was a worse holding call that wasn't called. Or even on Mahomes' game-sealing run where he went down at the 1-yard line, I forgot who it was, but it was a defender who Kelsey went to go run around, and he was basically stripped by the jersey and thrown to the ground. There was missed calls. There was calls that fans won't like. Unfortunately, that's the NFL. And unfortunately for Chiefs Kingdom, like I mentioned, we're going to be on TV probably every week this season. And NFL fan bases, they will pick on us because that's all they can see. All I can say is be happy, because at a different time, you couldn't even watch our team on TV. So, yes, you got to give it for what it is. You got to take the feedback, criticism that everyone gives. But if I'm watching my team on TV, I ain't going to complain. We're 3-1. I'm happy with it. But there are some things that really did bug me. So let's get into that. And last night, like I mentioned, we saw the Kansas City Chiefs offense in the first quarter clicking like they were against Chicago, and this looked like it was going to be a rout. And I was so excited. I was thrilled because one thing coming into this game, which their defense did show up, which we'll get to, is the New York Jets defense is not no slouch. They got studs. They got playmakers. They're the reason why for the last few years they have been a competitive team and why people have viewed them as a playoff team, even with Zach Wilson as their quarterback. So I knew this was not going to be no easy game. But after the first quarter, when the Kansas City Chiefs were up 17-0, you're like, okay, this offense has found its rhythm, and they were doing exactly what I want them to do, which is run the damn ball. And you got to give Isaiah Pacheco his praise. And I'm hoping, and I think it's finally happened, that Coach Reid realizes he may have a special back. I've been telling you guys throughout this season, off season, if you give Isaiah Pacheco 20 touches, he will easily go over 100 yards. And he displayed it on the field in his hometown in New Jersey, over 20 touches, 153 yards, and a touchdown. I believe it's going to be hard because Coach Reid is pass heavy, loves to throw the ball. But if you focus on Isaiah Pacheco, this offense will find a way to gel together. Mahomes won't have to be so dependent on these receivers that are quote-unquote questionable, which we will get to. And he can depend on a running game. This offense can be fluid, balanced, and it can be fun moving forward. And then also, you had a guy like Noah Gray streaking down the sideline with a great touchdown in this game, who I believe is a really underrated aspect for this team. And when we get into the later months, if these receivers continue to struggle, Mahomes may be calling on 83's number early and offense. And then when we shift our focus to the offensive line, I think they did a really solid game. Of course, fourth quarter, Jawan Taylor penalties keep getting called. And honestly, today they were Jawan Taylor penalties, literally. None of them were false starts or illegal formation or anything like that. It was the face mask. I think he had a holding as well. He just needs to correct him, get into his zone. Because if he doesn't have no penalties, it's a quiet game, and he looks like one of the best right tackles in the league. It's just getting really, really frustrating because when his penalties do happen, they're literally on critical third downs. So something needs to change there, or Jawan Taylor just needs to tighten a little screws as well. But for the whole O-line in general, I think they gave up, 1 or 2 sacks, and I can't even blame them on it as well. Those were coverage sacks where you could see Mahomes, he was panicking here and there, and he stayed in the pocket too long, and he was holding the ball. I can't blame the O-line for that. More of the coverage was just too excellent. So the fact that I believe they only gave up 1 or 2 sacks is very solid against a Jets defensive line that is very solid. And then after that, the transition. Literally, when you went to the second and third quarter, I do not know what the hell happened to this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Mahomes, like I said during my live stream, he got way too relaxed, way too comfortable, flicking the ball up like he was shooting a three-point shot and kind of playing a little disrespectful if you think about it, and just daring the Jets defenders to make a play. And then they did. And then when it got to the third quarter, as I mentioned too, it's like that look in his eye. He just looked lost to me. I've watched Mahomes far too much to know when he's ready to kill it. And the look he gave last night was not a look I was quite familiar with, where it's like, okay, what's going on? Am I in this? Can we get back? And then the fourth quarter came along. And then he started depending on his legs. And you know, when that boy depends on his legs, it could be game over. And that's basically what it was. When he can't find an option, he is the option. He proved it in the Super Bowl, and he proved it again last night. And then that's when I started looking at him. He started getting hype again. He got Kelsey involved in a tight end screen, which Kelsey picked up 12, and then Kelsey got hyped again. And then you could see him getting hype, and you're like, okay, this is the Kansas City Chiefs I know. What was going on in the second and third quarter? You were there in the first quarter, and then you disappeared 2 quarters, and then you showed back up. I'm like, okay, there's too many personalities on this team. What's going on? And then they found a way to win the game. And then when you shift to the defense, this was the worst defensive performance this year. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because they let Zach Wilson look like Aaron Rodgers in this game, but still only allowed 20 points. And I'm going to struggle to have to blame the defenders on this more than I want to blame Steve Spagnuolo's game plan, because he did not dial up many blitzes, if any blitzes. And what I preached in previews going into this game is that Zach Wilson was not confident at all. And when you're dealing with a quarterback like Zach Wilson who's not confident, release the hounds. Get him to the ground and go after him and make him uncomfortable. And that just was not part of Steve Spagnuolo's game plan whatsoever. And that really, really frustrated me that he basically said, Zach Wilson, beat us deep or beat us with your arm and we'll live with it. And he did. And you got to give Zach Wilson so much credit. And I really appreciate the team the Kansas City Chiefs have as well, because they all praise Zach Wilson. I saw Mahomes do it. I saw all the defense do it. It was such a good sight to see. And I hope this turns out to be really well for Zach Wilson, because even though this was a loss for him, this seems like a W for him, because he was dicing us up. He was putting the ball in a perfect spot. Defenders were in great position for a lot of these plays, and he was making it to where only his guy can catch it. And I saw Mahomes when he dapped him up and then came to him and said, hey, play like that all year. And that was so dope to see, because then I saw Zach Wilson turn around and he looked at Mahomes again. He's going to let that ride with him all season. And I believe this will be a big momentum shift for him. I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5 or top 10 quarterback in this league. But if he plays like he did against the Kansas City Chiefs defense, he's going to win this New York Jets team some football games. So I'm excited to see how he does moving forward. But going back to our defense, Steve Spagnuolo, he's got a game plan differently, and it's release the hounds. It really is in these kind of situations, because we looked lost early and often. In the first quarter, it was easy to slide through because the offense was scoring. The defense, they held to 3 and outs. They were doing their consistent things, but they also struggle with, once something bad happens, it's straight downhill from there. And literally when the Kansas City Chiefs gave up the safety, and then it was that horse collar, and then they went to get the touchdown, it's like, uh-oh, the momentum ball is rolling for the New York Jets. Kansas City's defense struggles with that. They did against the Lions, and now they're doing it against the Jets. They need to find a way to stop momentum. I haven't seen it yet. They need to basically make that huge play to say, nah, momentum's back on our side. Let's roll. Once they can do that, they'll be a legit great defense. And another thing that was so concerning to me, even though they got it in a clutch scenario, welcome back to Sean Wharton, it was still a Zach Wilson mistake, unfortunately, where he fumbled the snap, Wharton picked it up, and got the Kansas City Chiefs their first turnover of the day. Literally going into this game, I thought the Kansas City Chiefs would have double interceptions, forced fumbles, whatever it may be, because I thought they were going to play relentless. The fact they got no turnovers in this game, I'm starting to get on my edge of my seat and get a little concerned, because we're struggling to get interceptions and turn the ball over. And how is that going to translate to when you play these championship caliber games and teams, and if your offense is making mistakes and you can't get the ball back to them, that can call game. So it's something to highlight, but the season is very young right now. They are 3-1. They are pushing forward. That is great. I did want to highlight a couple players from last night because we talked about the offense and the defense. Even though they were inconsistent and it may not have been the style play we liked, they still did their thing. They can still be a legit defense. But calling out guys like Mike Edwards, back-to-back weeks where it's like, okay, I see you, player. You doing your thing. He played good in coverage. He got a sack on the night. And then Brian Cook probably saved the game last night on that huge run by Breece Hall. And Breece Hall, he is no joke as a running back. So the fact Brian Cook basically flipped hips back and forth and took him down an open field was so huge, was so crucial, and was so clutch. I love what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing on defense, which is basically they're aggressive. They're aggressors. They may not get the turnovers, which may hurt in my mind, but they know how to lay the wood. They know how to lay a hit. And like I mentioned last night as well, they're a sure, solid tackling team, probably the best tackling team we've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs defense in a long time. So there's promise there. There's promise on the offense, and let's focus on the one thing, and it's what I titled this video. And we're going back on the offense. And I got to catch my voice for it. Is this wide receiving core? And Chiefs Kingdom, national media, we're all flustered. We're all frustrated because we do not know what's going on. We haven't had someone step up yet this season. And it's getting impatient. I'm going to use that word. I'm not going to go anything crazy out there. And a lot of people are thinking it's time for the Kansas City Chiefs to make a trade and get a wide receiver. First off, there's a wide receiver floating around that I'm going to dead. Chase Claypool would not be a good trade for the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are loaded with talent at the wide receiver room. They don't need to add another piece that's unproven talent as well. That gets you nowhere. If the Kansas City Chiefs are going to trade for a wide receiver, it better be someone who is solidified better than everyone in the room and can be a playmaker the first game he hits the field and Patrick Mahomes has trust right away. And that's going to be hard to find. And if you don't find that, it's going to be a waste of a season. So it's going to be interesting to see how Brett Veach attacks until the trade deadline and if that is a real area of need. But I really, really believe the answer is in the wide receiver room already. And who is it? It is rookie Rashee Rice. Every game, his snap count has been getting bigger, and he has been getting more productive. Now, he does have a drop early in every game, but afterwards, he doesn't drop anything. It's like he's got the jitters to start off, and it's like, I'm good to go. But Mahomes has shown he trusts him. In his low snap count he has, when he's on the field, he is Mahomes' most targeted wide receiver. He leads the Kansas City Chiefs in yards, I believe, as well. If you increase his snap count to where he's taking MVS snaps, Justin Watson snaps, he might get you 100-yard games. I believe it's time to take the diapers off him. It's time to take the training wheels off the bike and let Rashee Rice go. And now, you're going to hear it the first from me because I said, guys, be patient. It's a process. He's going to get pushed in slowly but surely and make a play. But last night, I believe, was inexcusable that Justin Ross only had 4 snaps. When your offense is struggling to make a play and you got potential playmakers and guys are struggling to get open, bring new guys in. Find a player that is willing to make a play. Not saying Justin Ross could have because we don't know. And we won't know if he's only getting 4 snaps. That's got to increase in the future because that was his lowest snap count to date this year, which leaves me kind of baffled. We're looking for a legit wide receiver on this team. And if you got your 2 guys who I believe have the highest potential in Rashee Rice and Justin Ross not getting snaps, you're never going to find that guy. And then when we focus on guys like Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore, I really don't know what to make of them at this time. I'm really hopeful that they will turn up to what we all anticipate and what we all hope. But the fact Sky Moore didn't have no catches and just reverses, and then the same with Kadarius Toney, he had like 1 catch and it was just like trickery stuff going on, leads me to believe what I don't believe. I don't know what's going on, and it's really, really getting frustrating. Last week, I was on a high with Sky Moore, and actually the back-to-back weeks. He had 2 solid weeks. Jacksonville was his better week, and I thought, okay, he's coming along. And I don't want to overreact as well, because that's what a lot of Chiefs Kingdom is doing right now. We're overreacting to the production last night, but we also got to give credit to the New York Jets secondary, because they do have some of the best in the league. And they put some of these young receivers to the test, and they failed. So we got to see how they bounce back next week against the Minnesota Vikings, because the Minnesota Vikings don't really have a great defense and really not a great secondary. And if these guys struggle then, I might be on that train of, okay, we need to literally look for something trade deadline, or you really need to put Rashee Rice out there more. That's the number one thing I really want to do. Rashee Rice needs to be on the field. I believe he can be great. And if I won't know that unless he's not out there. So I believe he needs to cut in half Watson snaps and MVS snaps, because literally them two, they do the same exact thing for this offense, and they're just running doing cardio because they're not getting the football. So you might as well have a football player out there that can get the football and can make a play. And with that, Chiefs Kingdom, I am long-winded, I am short-breathed, but that was my recap, my initial takeaways from last night's game. Please let me know what you thought of last night's game and how you feel. It was a weird game. It really was. Motions mixed, matched everywhere. At least we're 3-1, right? That's beautiful. At least we're leading the AFC, right? It's all positive. With that, I'm going to check out. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you did like this video, please leave that big thumbs up. Y'all take care. Peace.